Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. We are recapping the fall today.
Oh, man, oh, man. What a story.
Hey, I got to tell you this. So a buddy of mine calls, and, he's a big-time mountain guy. He's done, I think he's done all but 12 of the 14ers here in Colorado. It's Alan. You know Alan.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Sign
Alan.
Alan. Yeah.
Sign Alan.
Thanks, Alan, by the way.
And he sends me a message. He goes, hey, I just listened to the podcast. He goes, I know exactly where she fell. Exactly. He goes, I did that. I've done that one. And he goes,
no kidding.
Yeah. And he goes, as soon as I was listening to her, he's like, oh my God, I know exactly where she fell. And here's what was really funny about it. Because sometimes I don't know if we pull out some of the things that, when we're doing the podcast, I'm like, yeah, oh my God, that 250-foot fall, my God, if you look at 250 feet, that's just, it's terrifying, right? Well, he was standing
25 feet falling down a mountain would be terrifying to me.
Right, 10 foot, yeah. I'm thinking you're going to go all the way down to 1,500. And he's like, man, you have no idea. He says, that sent chills down my spine. He goes, because I was standing right where she fell. And I thought, oh my goodness, that is such an incredible thought process when somebody was actually standing exactly where she was at when she fell.
Yeah.
And his thing was, there's just no way she lived. How in the world, right? And so I wonder sometimes when we're doing these, do people really get a sense of how far 250 feet is? Not to mention, if she doesn't get stopped there, it's 1,500 more feet, right?
Right.
And it's certain death. And so I asked him, I said, well, does that change the way you do things? He says, man, he goes, when they were talking about how, now there's a little bit of fear of heights, and you certainly have that in the back of your mind. He says, I've always climbed like that. And he goes, it was really awesome to hear how they felt about that when you actually do it yourself. So I thought that was just amazing.
Yeah. It's funny because I actually had a conversation with the guy who I'm going to be climbing my first 14er with over the weekend. And so he knows the area pretty well. So actually, I don't know if you remember, but Jen talked about Humboldt, which is the mountain right next door to Crestone. And so that's potentially the one we're going to climb at the end of the month. And so I was like, oh, man, I don't know. I'm a little nervous here. But I asked him about that spot device. I said, do you carry one of those? And he said, I don't. But he goes, I have a different type of GPS thing that we'll carry. So
yeah. Well, I asked Alan the same thing. I said, do you carry one of those? He says, I don't. But he says, I'm going to now.
Yeah. I have no idea how much they cost, but it's got to be worth every penny if you ever have to use it. It's kind of like insurance, right?
Right. Yeah, no, that was intense. I really enjoyed that. That was another one of our signature real life, real stories. That was amazing.
Yeah, that was an incredible story. So, outside of what we just talked about, what was your biggest takeaway from that one?
I think two of my biggest takeaways that kind of collide into one was I love how she was doing what she loves to do. I asked her this question during the podcast. If her husband was still as okay with her going out and climbing after the fall, especially being obviously pregnant. Yeah, I don't know, man. I just wouldn't. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you something, and it's probably too crude to even put on True Talks, but I'm doing it anyway. My youngest, he hates heights, right? And it's just this thing we do in our family. If we're up somewhere and it's pretty high, he's like, "Oh, Dad, we got to leave. My balls are tingling," and that's his way. He literally says his balls tingle when he gets up too high, right? And I always think we always just get a kick out of that. And but it is also interesting as I've gotten older. I'm not a great big fan of heights anymore.
Oh,
my dad he hates it. So there's a lot of people that actually hate that fear of heights. And then I have to tell this episode too, or this story. So we were doing the road above Estes Park, the highest one, whatever. What's that called?
Oh, Trail Ridge.
Trail Ridge.
Yeah.
And we get up to about 10,000, 11,000 feet, whatever it was. And, you were looking over. So we had Landon look over. And next thing we know, he kind of jumps. He says, oh, man, I got really tired. I fell asleep for a second. He freaking passed out. So I know my kid's not going to be
The fear was so great, he actually passed out.
He passed out inside our van, right? And I am like, oh, my God, this kid will never be a mountain climber, right, or a pilot or anything. He freaks out. So I think, for a lot of people listening, man, that is like really high. 14,000 is really high. I've got a good friend of mine who we're bringing on the show too, Gary Scott.
Yeah.
He's done Everest, and he's a world class, owned the world record, highest ascent, fastest ascent, and descent in Mount McKinley. He's going to also talk about just what that's like to kind of be on top of the world, right? So this, I really, when you brought this episode, this is someone that you knew, and when you brought this episode, I was thinking to myself, man, what a great episode, especially living in Colorado. And I was super impressed with that takeaway that somebody has that passion. They live here in Colorado.
Yeah.
She got to go do that all the time. But at the same time, I'm equally struggled over here with, I wouldn't want my wife doing it.
No, I think, for me, it's kind of, it kind of touches on that whole fear thing. And I thought, what she said was really kind of compelling at the end, which was, she still has that fear. She has a healthy dose of fear now that she didn't have before. And I think for any of us, whether it's mountain climbing or whatever, right, you have to have a certain amount of fear in what you do, because otherwise, I think you become careless, right? Or you can become very...
Just make a mistake.
Yeah, you can make a mistake because, you don't have that fear, right? The drive isn't gone, but the fear sort of just makes you a little bit cautious and makes you think, okay, let me think this through for just a second before I just throw caution to the wind and try to do something. So
and you can tell it's a passion of hers. And then what I actually loved about the podcast too, and kind of my second takeaway that ended up colliding was, with Adam here, I didn't really know exactly where that was going to fit in, other than the fact that I thought his story was equally as important, being the second climber.
Yeah.
And having to watch that. And then he goes from mountain climber to rescuer. And so I know a lot of the story was focused around, the fall.
Right.
But I actually also loved Adam's story of the guy that turned mountain climber, now rescuer, and just that fear that he must have felt watching his good friend fall down that
Well,
mountain.
and that's just it. I think he did such a fantastic job of telling that side of the story. And, I thought the line he said in the podcast was just perfect, which was, in a moment like that, you always think you're going to be the superhero that's going to rescue somebody or save the day. And the reality is you probably are just going to freeze like Adam did and in total disbelief. Like, what the hell did I just see?
Yeah.
I just saw my best friend, slide over a cliff. And what am I going to see when I go look over that cliff?
Almost certain death.
Yeah. So
That was a great story.
I thought his story was just, like you said, equally as compelling. Almost probably could have just been two separate podcasts, but I'm glad we had them on together to tell the story.
Yeah, that was a great one. I really, really, really enjoyed that.
Yep.
It was heavy.
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, I mean, when you think about it, right? Like, if
Had a happy outcome.
It had a great outcome. But if you're that husband at home, that wife at home, which both of them had, they get that transponder call that something's wrong. That's a scary moment. But we're gonna follow it up with a little bit of fun, right?
Yep, we are.
What do we got? I'll let the cat
Well,
out.
we had a special guest stop by the other day, right? You never know who's going to show up at True Talk Studio. And so you called me and said, hey, I've got a special guest that's coming by. And it was Josh Blue. And I think anybody that watches any TV or knows anything about comedy or anything knows who Josh Blue is. And we're very fortunate. Not only is Colorado home to 58 of the 96 14ers in the nation, we have some amazing talent that reside here in Colorado, including Josh Blue.
Yep, he this guy, he just makes you laugh just sitting around him. Not even talking to him. He just makes you laugh because he's going to say something crazy. He's going to say something funny.
We should be on my end trying to edit this thing.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
But you know what? You're absolutely right with Josh. The guy. Sometimes I think you look at these comedians and you think, is that who they really are? Or is that just, is that a character, a persona that they put on stage, right? Because they are entertainers, they're actors in some cases. But I can tell you, and I know you will agree, with Josh, that is not the case. No. Who he is on stage is exactly who he is sitting in this chair.
Yeah, I'm not going to let any more out because you'll learn about him in the podcast. But that was one where you leave and your face hurts and I try and prepare for guests. We try and make sure there's certain questions. Let me just tell you what, with comedians, forget about it. Put it aside. It's not going to happen. You're going to go all over hell, and that was the fun in it too. I don't know how you're going to do anything on that.
It's a fun one for sure. So
well, I'm super excited, and that is this Thursday.
That'll be this Thursday, tomorrow.
Fantastic,
yep.
Man. I'm excited.
So tune in tomorrow. Facebook, YouTube, or wherever you get your audio podcasts. And thank you guys so much, Truth Talks Nation, for all the support. We're now over 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed, check us out. And we're at 1,100 and something on Facebook. So Truth Talks Nation continues to grow. And a quick shout out to our friend, Cody, the Crippler Crowley, for defeating Torres on Saturday night. If you didn't get a chance to watch it on Fox Sports 1, Cody had an amazing fight, and he's moving up in the ranks.
Well, we will follow him. We will do another podcast with him in Las Vegas when he wins the belt, potentially before the end of the year.
Yeah. So anyway, congratulations, Cody. Thanks again, everybody, and be sure to like and follow us.
Thank you much.
All right.